Hello, listeners. Thank you for joining me on 21st Century Native Leaders. My name is Peter Deswood III, and I am here with Nephi Craig. Nephi is a chef, and he also operates his Cafe Gojo. Nephi was also featured in the film Gather. Welcome, Nephi.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. So, talk with me a little bit about your tribal affiliation, possibly clans, where you come from.
Okay, I'm White Mountain Apache. Was born in White River, Arizona. My mother is White Mountain Apache. Our clan is from Sibicu, Spitsun on my mom's side. And then I'm also Navajo on my late father's side. My dad was from Crown Point in Mexico, and I'm Kluge on that side. So that's half and half.
Nice. A lot of yoga in that Crown Point, Twin Lakes, Tohatchee area. So
Yeah.
right on. So talk to me about how you became a chef, culinary school. Talk to me about that path.
Okay. Well, I've been cooking. I've been cooking now 23 years professionally, and cooking and food had just kind of been something I'd been doing since I was a little kid. I had always, baked with my mom, or my grandfather grew a garden, and we also grew squash and stuff in our backyard in White River. So, it was just kind of naturally a part of my life. I didn't think that there was anything unusual about a grandpa's garden. You know what I mean? My grandpa's garden. It was just a cool place to be. Get to play in the mud and climb the pear trees, and just help out. Um, and so when I got into when I was growing up, when I got out of high school, I just kind of decided what do I want to do with my life. I don't really know. I in high school I liked English, I liked art, I liked photography and video productions. I liked science, and but most of all, I was really into skateboarding and still am. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something in one of those areas, but as a young kid, I didn't really apply myself, so I didn't think I didn't take the SATs. So it's just kind of in a corner, and I had to make a decision. And I just decided to. I just kind of looked at it real logically and just said, "What have I been doing the most?" Um, I've been cooking my whole life, so I just decided to go to a cooking school in Scottsdale. And so I really had no restaurant experience prior to going to cooking school. And I didn't really know anything about the culture of cooking or chefs or in kitchens. I just kind of went for it. But I realized right away I really, really enjoyed it. Um, I didn't have a scholarship per se. I had to work full time while going to school. So during the daytime at school, I was taking 17 credit hours at cooking school, and then at nighttime, I had a regular line cooking job in a nice place. So I was kind of working really hard for the first 2 years of my career to get done with school and to stay employed. So it was cool though. I really liked it.
That's awesome. That's a pretty amazing journey that path you've taken. So talk with me about how you were featured in the Gather film.
Uh, the film Gather, by the time you meet me in that film, I'm already like 20, 21, 22 years into my cooking career. Um, I had gone to see I went to culinary school in 1998, in the fall of 98 before 99. And so I have been doing this for a long time. I've been fortunate enough to cook in London and Germany and Japan and Brazil, and to really travel coast to coast doing native foods. So by the time that you get to meet me in that film, I've accumulated a long track record and a large body of work that I'm happy about, and I've committed a lot of time to native foods. And so I guess the way that I'm a visible character, you know what I mean? If you Google Native American cuisine or cooking, I'm one of the few people that pop up. And I've been doing it since, focusing on native food since like 99. And so it's been a long time coming. I didn't just get into cooking a couple of years ago. I didn't just graduate culinary school. Like, I've been in the trenches for a long time, and I take pride in that. So when the opportunity came to do the film, I was hesitant at first because, as you may know, a lot of times film producers and film crews and reporters, they want to come into our communities and pretend like they discovered us. They want to over romanticize who we are as Native peoples. They want to tell a story about us and not let us speak, really. And I made it real clear that that's not what I wanted. I didn't want to be a part of a project like that, and I really had to kind of be persuaded to participate. But I did mention that if I'm going to be a part of the film, that I would really, really want the target audience to be Native communities first. That that this video or this film was made accessible to schools and agencies and community members, because that's who needed to hear what we had to share. So that they agreed, and so far we had this like big release kind of plan, but the pandemic really got in the way of all that. So now they're doing a lot of online screening, and people can reach out to gather and ask to do screenings or ask to get copies of the movie too. So from Native communities. So I think if someone works for like an agency, a Native organization or an agency, I think they might be able to get a copy of the film. So either access online or an actual DVD. So just a little tidbit of info.
That's awesome. I tell you what, it was a inspirational movie, just highlighting the various Native communities in North America, I guess in the Americas, not necessarily South America, but I learned a lot about it. And my dad's side of the family, we grew up farming, so a lot of the stuff that you were talking about, I could relate to it. And I think a lot of Navajos in particular, I'm not too sure about other tribes, but Navajos in particular, there's a big story with farming and ranching. So I think it was relatable. So I know in the film or the documentary, you are opening Cafe Gojo. Talk with me
Mhm.
about that. Talk with me about that opening and that process to open that business.
Well, Cafe Gojo, I work for the Rainbow Treatment Center in White River. It's my community. See, I was born in White River, and that's where I grew up basically. I grew up till I was about 10 years old in White River, and then till I was 18 in Window Rock. Um, and so in my community, that's the Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center. It's a residential and outpatient treatment center. And so before that, I spent about 9 years at the Sunrise Park Resort Hotel as a chef there. And that's our tribe ski resort in the mountains. And I had always wanted to do something, I think the combination of being in our mountains, working with our own people, and seeing the struggles and successes of our team, and also couple that with sobriety, was able to really kind of see food different. And I wanted to do something different. I didn't know how or how it would happen. But after a number of years at Sunrise, I was finally able to, opportunity came to work with the treatment center where there were positions opening up. And one of them was for the nutritional recovery program. And so I applied, and fortunately I was able to get the position. And Rainbow wanted to open a cafe of some sort, and so the visioning kind of came down to my experience with my own sobriety, and then my long to that point 21 years of professional experience cooking. And so the cafe, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, has been closed. It just shuttered temporarily, but when it's safe, we'll open back up. So when you see in the film, it's like the soft opening activities. And but it's a combination of vocational training, and also, to make it really simple, just keeping Native foods in sight, in mind. As you know, in our Native communities, there's so many issues and challenges and obstacles for us in our pathway to health, that we could get caught up in all the jargon and the terms and the obstacles. But I felt, we felt like just keeping native foods insight in mind, the community experts, like grandma, grandpas, fluent language speakers, they would have the connection to the foods in a different way than maybe I did as a chef. Someone that doesn't speak Apache, that doesn't speak Navajo, but I'm able to cook and prepare different foods. So we just kind of hope to spark memories with food by keeping an insight in mind. And we're opening it in an old gas station on the north side of town. So that's kind of a real simple explanation of what we hope to achieve with the cafe.
That's awesome. That's pretty
Mm-hmm.
cool idea behind that. It's pretty interesting. I have some cousins that are half White Mountain Apache, or no, San Carlos
Mm-hmm.
Apache. So down that way before you drop into the, what is it, Salt River Canyon over
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So talk with me. Do you have any formal business experience? How did you get the idea, the understanding of how to open that business and operate that business? I mean, any formal business experience?
Well, the culinary industry is very much like construction. You know what I mean? You work your way through the ranks as a laborer through a number of years, through leadership, through different types of self-training, and you kind of just develop the skills to learn how to assemble a team and begin to manage stuff. We get some of that information in culinary school, like the basics of food costing and food management and budgeting and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of it is you just kind of got to learn to just buckle down and make that a part of the training, because the cooking is the easiest part. As a chef, you're really taking what's in here and trying to put what's in here in other people's hands so that they can execute a larger vision. And you're kind of less hands-on in the beginning, but you definitely want to train and be involved with your teams. And the same thing goes for managing. When I was the chef at the hotel at Sunrise, same thing. You kind of just, as you're climbing through the ranks in the industry, you're just kind of getting experience to getting exposed to different things, using the cash register, doing all the paperwork, and just kind of handling it on a natural basis. So that's kind of how I learned the ins and outs of that. The kitchen design at in the cafe. I designed the layout, and we worked with contractors to get it finalized. And the design of the kitchen was inspired by other kitchens that I had been in the country, and just trying to really maximize the space, knowing things like traffic flow or receiving and shipping out, just all the basics like that, and kind of putting it in a small space to meet the needs of our type of service, I guess.
That's awesome. I like that you got to design the kitchen yourself. So I know I actually have a business degree, but I know when I was in college, I managed a KFC up in Durango, Colorado, and Cafe Durango as well. But like you always read about in the restaurant industry, when you open a restaurant, it takes 5 years until you make a profit. Have you experienced that, or how did you navigate that going up and facing that challenge?
Well, by the time you see the soft opening activities in the film Gather, that was just prior to the pandemic. I believe January was when that was filmed. And so we haven't even got to full speed yet. That was just with a small core team. And like I said, it was soft opening activities. So all of our projections, our financial projections and revenue projections, we haven't even seen through yet. So, and it is true that the margins are real thin in restaurants, and because we're a health agency, it's a little bit different. You know what I mean? We're going to be doing the vocational training and the recovery work. So that's another area where some of how we'll be funded too. So it's a formula, definitely, but I think it's going to work out in the long run. We just got to get past COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have a contract probably with the Department of Health or something like that to
Well,
help fund or.
I work for Rainbow Treatment Center, and so Rainbow Treatment Center is, the drug and alcohol treatment center, and I'm the coordinator of the nutritional recovery program. So in my program exists the cafe.
Oh, okay. All right, that
Hmm.
makes sense now. Okay, I see
Yeah,
how that
I'm
works.
not an individual owner. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, okay. All right.
Hmm.
And I that's I was trying to figure out how that process was. So, and I think that's one of the things I try to explore through the podcast is the complex nature of opening businesses on reservations, right? It's pretty
Hmm.
challenging. There's a lot of red tape in helping people navigate that process. So
Yeah.
I'm assuming a lot of the funding then and the risk is on part of the treatment center. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think also too, not only just keeping the native foods insight in mind, but also the cafe to hope to demonstrate the need for other small businesses because the skills that we're going to teach are not just culinary. The future of native foods and native health is not fine dining at all. The future of native foods and native health is connection to landscape. It's connection to language. It's connection to identity, even the future of drug addiction and treatment modalities is not just clinical within four walls. It's more a whole person approach, and it's more integrating what we see every day. And so the cafe, if we can, the type of training will be professional culinary training, but it's also to focus on our calorie-rich landscape, the White Mountains. So if you can imagine the diversity from Mount Baldy, which is almost 12,000 feet, down to like 2,000 feet in the Salt River Canyon, there's a vast variety of flora and fauna to choose from. We've got all four seasons, and so it's very much like the Neta in that we're still in our ancestral landscape. We're still in our ancestral territories. Our groups of people were not displaced and moved away. There were moments when we were pushed out and pushed away, but we are where we've been for thousands of years. And so, as it comes to reclaiming health, I feel like, and I hope that the cafe can. I kind of look at it like if there was this pre-contact concept or identity of who we are as Dene or Inde people, I feel like all the elements of our lives that make us Navajo or that make us Apaches, that was all taught to us by the land. That was all. We became Navajos or we became Apaches by being in the landscape, by the stars, by the seasons, by the animals, by the bugs, by the foods. And so, fortunately for our two tribes, um, we're still in our ancestral territories. So we've got the land, we've got the foods, we've got the plants, we've got the roots, we've got the animals, we've got the seasons. All those things that informed our pre-colonial identity are still there. And so I hope that in a small way, either small or large, we can simply guide our people back to those connections, back to the landscape, back to the fishing, back to the hunting, back to using the stars, and back to singing corn, singing to corn, growing and planting crops. Because though it, to me, with all my experience traveling around the world and cooking and doing all this stuff, and then getting clean and getting sober, I feel like the native foods and the farming practices and the art practices and the ceremonial practices, they're just a real clear cut path to actual decolonization, not hashtagging decolonization for cool points. I feel like it cuts through all the political, business, legal, all that big words of the colonizers, and just keeps it so simple and powerful that when you plant a seed, you're a revolutionary. You're planting corn again. When you build a hogan or when you build a wikia, you know. So I feel like I feel like I feel like I'm fortunate to be a cook. You know what I mean? And to kind of hopefully I can share this sentiment with others, and they can pick it up and retranslate it in their own way. I wish I could say what I'm saying now in Apache or Navajo. It'd probably be even more colorful and dynamic. So that's what I hope the cafe does, is that it opens up our own eyes and we can see the need, because right now food and cooking is on the back burner to water rights, to fracking, to COVID-19, to diabetes, to health, to violence, to incarceration. It's way in the back of our minds, especially in the minds of decision makers. And it's not until someone points it out, or it's in mind, that it begins to we see the value, so that's what I hope happens with the cafe.
I like that. That's a really good goal to pursue. So I know there's in the movie there's a lot of emphasis in food preparation, food sovereignty, but I like the way you coupled that sobriety journey. Talk with me a little bit about that, because it was emphasized quite a bit.
Okay, hang on just a second. Let me close this up. Yeah, sorry about that. The
Oh, you're good.
lights beaming in. Sobriety is something that needs to be talked about. There's a stigma around mental health and recovery, and for us in Indian country, addiction and other mental health disorders and things like alcoholism and drug addiction they're very visible, and they're stigmatized, and we're stereotyped for those things. What dominant society fails to recognize, and even therapy culture in some ways, is that the drug addiction and alcoholism is only the tip of the iceberg to a much longer legacy that we've inherited, which is historical trauma. And so this intergenerational grief and this intergenerational confusion, per se, has kind of interrupted our own family patterns. It's interrupted many of our food traditions. The disconnection from landscape and language. It's really kind of shaped and informed our decisions and how we feel lost. And I think the conversation really needs to happen, because for a long time, and a lot of clinicians and other professionals will understand this, that for a long time, if for me, prior to getting sober, I'd been trying for all my life since I was a teenager, right? And early in the early 2000s, when I first spoke with a counselor who was non-native, and the sentiment was kind of like we're genetically predisposed to becoming alcoholics. And that's a really damaging statement for anyone to say about any human being. That's basically saying you're genetically inferior, which is not true. What we know now, and that now that there's a lot more native clinicians and native professionals and indigenous researchers that can do our own research into intergenerational grief and complex grief, we know now that that's just Western therapy culture's dismissal of our indigenous experience, trying to dismiss the fact that historical trauma is real. And so kind of evidence that historical trauma is real, because there's historical trauma deniers out there right now. I mean, it's like, no, it didn't happen. Don't talk about it. It's okay. We're okay now. We got cars and blah, blah, blah. We're fine. But if that were true, if historical trauma was not true, I would be speaking in Apache to you. I would be speaking in Navajo to you. I would be able to articulate my spiritual malady in my indigenous tongue. But because colonial violence, historical trauma, and the dislocation of this scrambling, right? I'm not a fluent speaker. I'm speaking the language of the colonizer, And so it's really important that we address that. And that's why I didn't plan to, I didn't say when I was working in all these great restaurants and kitchens and places, right? I didn't say, yeah, man, I'm gonna go back to the res and work. I'm gonna be a chef at a treatment center. You know what I mean? That wasn't my mindset. But the foods took me there. You know what I mean? Like trusting that if the foods are alive and they're sacred and they're a part of our identity, then I was trusting them too. But it's a really big, important topic, and I was able to get clean, and I'm 9.5 years sober. And I really would like to be able to offer tools and techniques, things that help me, because I know our communities really need it. Our communities really need it, and there's no reason to be afraid to talk about it. There's absolutely no reason. It's actually one of the most courageous things that anyone can do, is choosing to say, I need help. That's actually the most powerful revolutionary act someone can do. And to me, that's cool. So that's why I'm very open about it. And I know that it's very common on my res, on your res, on all the reservations across North and South and North America and into Canada. It's one of the most common symptoms of a deeper wound. You know what I mean? And I know we have the power to heal. So to me, the future of recovery is natives, us creating the modalities, not Western psychology telling us that, yeah, this will work. No, it's like us natives saying this will work for us and employing it. You know what I mean? And that's exciting. You know what I mean? That's exciting to me. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's the thing is as we've gotten more educated and learned the dominant society's ideals and stuff like that, we're bringing back our own knowledge, our own native knowledge into things. But one thing that I noticed that's really amazing is as your journey, like there's an emphasis, or there's a coupling of food sovereignty as well, because and I think that was one thing that was emphasized in the movie, right? That there's a push towards native food sovereignty, and then your journey away from alcohol abuse or drug abuse. But I mean, talk with me a little bit about what food sovereignty means to you.
Food sovereignty to me is the freedom to use food and ancestral knowledge in any way we see fit as Native peoples. I feel like if we feel like creating an educational experience for kindergarten kids, or for our elder feeding program, or if we want to put traditional foods in our IHS menus, then we should be able to do it. I feel like food sovereignty means that we have the right and the ability and the resources to create food programming for youth. Because to even making something like saying, all right, we're gonna take away the gender bias of cooking, and we're gonna put an emphasis on teaching young men to cook, so that we can create that balance and not say that cooking is just women's work. You know what I mean? Because a lot of guys feel that way, and they're very insecure about it, and they tease each other about it. You know what I mean? That's an example of how we could use food sovereignty. I feel like food sovereignty is just liberation, indigenous liberation, to choose what we want to grow. Because if you think about it, man, it's like, corn is connected to so many of our ceremonies, and we could choose to grow corn in a way that we see fit. And then gathering foods, different roots, different ingredients. These foods are just not there for sustenance. They've got connections to the stars, they've got connections to the cycle of where we are around the sun. And so maximizing our spiritual experience in this contemporary, I guess, construct, or this existence right now, as Native peoples, I feel like that's what food sovereignty is all about, is really tapping into the core and pulling out and using what is appropriate for our age right now. And to me, that's nothing new. That's what our people have been doing since time immemorial. So food sovereignty, it's also, to me, it's also very, it's very humble. You know what I mean? It's very intimate. It starts at home. It starts with what we choose to eat ourselves, and it starts with what we choose to cook for our families. It starts with what we choose to pass on as food traditions. So in the context of like a film or a documentary, or even in social media, food sovereignty sounds like this really kind of fist in the air movement and act. But in reality, to me, food sovereignty is very intimate, and it's very special, and it's very private too. You know what I mean? Because look at it this way: try to change someone's eating habits, their favorite junk food snacks, try to call them out and say, hey, that's not good for you, in a really kind way. They'll get really upset, So it's very personal, but it's also very powerful. So that's kind of what food sovereignty means to me.
Yeah, that's
And that's like not trying to get into the whole political, legal universe of it, because that's all there too, you know?
right. And I think that's why I wanted to hear your perspective from the culinary perspective. But I mean, you're absolutely right. I think people start saying, "Oh, you're food shaming me," right? And it's like it's a fine line between trying to be subtle and telling people to eat healthier. And that's a really good point you made. So with COVID-19, I know there was impact on Cafe Gaujon, but I know in our area up in Farmington and in Shiprock, Kirtland area, there was an increase of people starting gardens. Going back to traditional ways since everyone's been at home. Was that something that was similar up in the White Mountain Res in your area?
Yeah, and I think it was pretty similar across Native communities also. I feel like the pressures of the pandemic caused a lot of us to begin to gather wild foods, to go back to a lot of these traditions we felt like we might have left behind. It seemed like, at least in my social media feeds, I saw many more pictures of families going, like, in families that quarantine together, right? They're going out to get acorns or piñons, or they're in the middle of the summer, they were harvesting and showing their wild tea. People were getting prickly pears. People were getting yucca blossoms, people were getting the yucca fruit, the Apache bananas. So yeah, at least in my kind of small circle, or my food universe, I was seeing a lot of it. And I think that's just kind of us as natives listening to what Earth is telling us. You know what I mean? Like, come back. It's like she's saying, come back. Come back, Shiaz. Come back. I'm here. I got what you need, kind of thing. And maybe we don't put it in words and we don't say it like that, but that's what we're feeling. You know what I mean? And so we go do those things. So I really hope that that continues at the level of policy and decision makers in our Native communities. I hope we take this opportunity, all the pressures of the pandemic, to realize what's really important, like our own mental health, our own nutrition, our own access to food, and also that resources should be put in those areas. That's food sovereignty.
Absolutely, and I completely agree with you. So I know you mentioned this a little bit earlier about people, or men thinking that cooking is there's a gender role that happens there. But like I think that's one thing that's really awesome about I've been starting to see more native chefs, male chefs, and people. I'm a high school principal, and I have students who want to get into the culinary arts. So that when they see you and other chef out there like Yazi, there's a I think that's why I wanted to interview you, because that you're a role model. You don't there's not this bad picture of like we said, these gender stereotypes of cooking, but that's one thing that's amazing. So talk with me. I know, let's expand on that. Excuse me, a little bit more as far as breaking those gender stereotypes.
Well, as being both Apache and Navajo, we come from matrilineal societies, and a lot of those traditions do revolve around the home and the circle of the Wickiup or the circle of the Hogan, and so it's like a lot of those the infiltration of the colonial mindset or colonization process, and the concept of the nuclear family from like the Industrial Revolution in the 50s, right, 60s, that kind of gets into our lives, and things begin to shift, right? And these gender stereotypes come from outside of our culture, From what we know today about ourselves as Apaches and Navajos, we've always accepted everyone for who they are, as just human beings, as people. There was no real strong bias that someone was going to be condemned for choosing to do something. There were really specific roles ceremonially, and those are protocol. But on an everyday basis, I feel like talking about being just a responsible adult, especially when you're talking with young people or adults that want to make changes in their lives, framing it in a way that says cooking is a life skill. Cooking is just a way to be more independent. whether or not you're going to do it as a job. It's like riding a bike. You learn how to use a knife and you learn a couple good skills, you'll remember it forever. So I feel like adding those themes into curriculums, or even talking about it in schools, will help us to be healthier. Because if dad likes to cook, and he can give mom a break a lot, you know what I mean, or they can balance out the workload at home. So I would really like to be able to see that, you know what I mean. And in the professional chef world, for a long time, it was dominated by old white guys. You know what I mean? Like most chefs, you always hear it. Most chefs are men, and blah blah blah. Only real men can cook, or men are only good chefs are men. That kind of stuff. But that's also a kind of a damaging stereotype. Um, Now in our generation, see, the generation that I began cooking in was very it was that real old school, toxic, classic French, like abusive kitchen culture that I started out in, and
Machismo.
then moving. What's that?
Machismo.
Yeah, definitely. And so it's changing now. Prior to the pandemic, it was getting more. People were finally beginning to talk about the psychological toxicity of some kitchen environments. Not all of them, but as more indigenous people and people of color begin to talk about equality and justice and injustices, there was a big the conversation now is about highlighting female chefs and female leadership in the hospitality industry, because for so long the standard for excellence was like the old school classic French. It was a male dominated thing based on the military hierarchy, and so that's a white Western concept. And then for us as natives, the food and the nurturing comes from mama and grandma, right? And men are there to support and help and carry out those tasks. So it's very two different kind of mindsets that kind of clash. So it's pretty neat to think that we're at this juncture, or that we have this opportunity to to take away that colonial paradigm that cooking is women's work at home or domestic work, and switch it to being that it's just part of being a responsible adult or being a responsible parent, because majority of us, almost all of us, are going to become parents, or already are parents. So I feel like it's cooking is unique in that there's no age limit to when you can start changing habits and doing stuff different. It's cool if you start young. Yeah, you'll be really good at it earlier, but then you can also switch up your paradigm and heal your family as a dad when you're older. So it's pretty cool like that. That's what I think about that whole question.
That's awesome. I like your take on that. So let's switch over to some of the food you make. What
Hmm.
native dish is your favorite to prepare?
Oh man, it's I really like making stews. I really like to make pozole. I spent a lot of time in Crown Point, New Mexico when I was little, and my grandma Nancy, she had a big old adobe oven in her backyard, and she would make bread in there and roast corn in there, and next to it was a little fire pit. So every time we went out to Crown Point, she was always a lot of times she was cooking outside. And one of my favorite things she always made was red chili hominy stew, right? Either with mutton or with beef or whatever was there, but it was always really simple. And when I after I turned 18 and I was living in the city, I was trying to recreate that, you know what I mean, from memory. And I couldn't nail it. I was like, what is it? Something's different about, I'm using the similar ingredients that I remember her use, but something's different. And all of a sudden, one day it just kind of clicked. I wasn't even cooking and it clicked. I was like, oh, it was the fire. It was the fire. It was the smoke. It was the ashes falling back down in the soup, and it was the smoke getting on everything. That's that depth. So I like to make, if I'm not cooking on a fire and I want that smoky depth of flavor, I'll uh, I'll take the meat, whether it's beef, pork, mutton, or whatever. I'll grill it first, and then I'll dice it, and then I'll make the pasoli. Because when you grill it, all that smoke gets on it. You know what I mean? Um, so I like doing that. Um, I like making fresh pasta from scratch. Well, that's not a native thing, but um, out here in Apache land, I like acorn stew. It's one of my favorite things to make. I like doing Apache cornbread when we get corn from our farm in White River. I just, I just love the act of cooking itself. You know what I mean? It's hard to answer.
That's true. I like that. I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that's important is remembering back, those flavors when you were a kid and your masana or your Nella Sam made food, right? And you're like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, I just remember when I was little and I was at my Nolly sheep camp and she would make these biscuits and she would make some eggs and we put some bacon, those thick cut bacon.
Yeah.
I just remember that bacon sizzling early in the morning, and then we would take one for lunch while we would after the sheep. Those are those memories I think that you were just talking about. So, which dish took you some time to learn and to go through and understand how to make it?
Um, Probably, I think it's more of a technique than anything. Learning how to do barbecue corn. You know what I mean? Like digging the pit, getting the rocks, getting the right wood, finding a nice place. And it's a long process. Like if you're going to do it, if you're not going to just go buy a big box of corn and dig a hole, if you're going to know someone in your community that grows corn, that's been taking care of the corn from the springtime all the way until the fall, and they trust you enough to give you their harvest, or they trust you enough to barbecue with you, you got to dig a pit, right? Get all the stones. I know out in Navajo land, a lot of times they're done in circle pits. Out here, we do them in like rectangular, real deep pits, and we do a large amount. Um, and so that was one thing that was really exciting for me to learn how to do. I had seen in Apache land here, we would barbecue like whole sides of beef, right? Like for big ceremonies, and it'd be like the whole would be big as a king size bed. You know what I mean? Like and like 5 feet deep. And so on a smaller scale, learning how to do that with corn was really important for me as a cook. I really like the process. It's exciting, and once I was able to learn to do that, I was able to transfer it over and just start doing on a smaller scale in a shorter amount of time doing vegetables. So when we have the time and the resources, I like to dig a pit and cook in the ground. I've put crock pots cast irons with lids in the ground full of red chili. I put pumpkins in the ground. I put carrots and potatoes in the ground, and just lay down the greens or the corn husks and mix in the hot stones and throw on whatever else and cover it up and put a big old plyboard over it and just cover it back with dirt and just let it steam and roast at the same time for hours. And it's really cool. I think it's more of the whole process is like the dish itself. When you do that for a big group of people and there's young and old, man, you just hear the conversation, the excitement. You hear the Apache elders talking, and there's like saying "K yeah," they're talking in Apache and talking about how they used to do stuff with corn, and the young kids are all there, all excited to help. You know what I mean? And you pull it out, and then you feed everyone. It's just really cool. And that's nothing new. It's thousands and thousands of years old. We've been doing that. It's pretty cool, man. That's what I like to do.
That's a really good point. I never thought about that. That those are definitely privilege if you grew up farming and preparing corn. Like I said earlier, my family were farmers and ranchers, and we prepared a lot of corn. Like you're saying, we actually used to put it in a bread oven and get the bread oven going for half a day, and then putting all the corn in there, packing it, and getting big 5-gallon containers and dumping water in there to make steamed corn for our nishiji, right?
Uh-huh.
But that's that thing you're talking about. That technique, I like how it takes time to improve those techniques and to learn those techniques. So it's pretty amazing.
And
So
what I think about that too is like if you switch it up and use that one technique, how people gather, how people share memories, how people are excited and happy, how we offer prayers at the beginning and at the end, and then again when we're going to eat. that whole process is healing. You bring the family together, you bring this network of other farmers and other cooks, and it's just a little web of, in the Western world, the colonizers would say that's cognitive behavioral therapy, that's dialectical behavioral therapy. They would say that's group dynamics. You know what I mean? And for us, that's just a way of life. So that's an example again of how the healing methods are woven into our everyday lives, and that's how I feel it's powerful with food. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, like whenever you're talking about, getting that corn in the rectangular pits, I mean, we used to do it as our whole family. And on my dad's side, he had 11 brothers and sisters. So I think I probably had like 60 or 70 cousins running around in the cornfield, picking corn, throwing it into the truck, and then taking it up top. And, people had their jobs. People were doing specific duties, hauling water. Back in the
Yeah.
day, we didn't have water back in the 80s. The water line wasn't there yet. So we'd have to go to the hand pump, but everybody did their part. And we made kneel down bread, we made steamed corn, and just, oh man, it was just good times. And I think that's what you captured by what you're saying about perfecting the techniques. So
Yeah.
man, I'm all out of my questions. Is there anything else you want to share?
Um, well, I just really like to share that it's not as difficult as you might think to return to some of our food traditions. Whenever I get to teach native foods, you don't have to do all indigenous foods all the time. You don't have to do all wild gathered or foraged foods all the time. Um, Kind of a tip on understanding native foods is expanding the food vocabulary first, and realizing that 70% of the foods in a grocery store that you go shop at, they're native foods. They're indigenous to the Americas. Tomatoes, chocolate, chilies, all corn, all beans, all squash, vanilla, sunchokes. The list goes on and on of how our ancestors changed the world because of our agricultural science, because of our connection to the stars, and because of how intelligently we saw the value of people, land, and water, and that was the real currency, and that's what has stood the test of time. And it's only because of the colonization process that really violently interrupted our lifeways. And so all of America, all of America has been eating native foods forever since they landed here. And so it's just that nobody is reclaiming that information. Like the squash zucchini has an Italian name, but it's indigenous to the Americas. All tomato Italy would be nothing without the tomato in their cooking, but that's an indigenous food. Potatoes are indigenous food. Chocolate, these are really important things for us to realize. And when we can begin that journey of knowing the truth of our ancestors' contribution to world cooking or world cuisine, it really opens it up. And at least for me, it feels very powerful. I feel more empowered knowing that my ancestors domesticated and contributed 70% of the foods that are consumed around the world globally. So chances are that you've been eating indigenous foods all along and you didn't even know it. But now that you do, take the investigation a little bit farther and support any other native cooks and food producers. And remember that you don't have to be a chef in a white coat to be an expert. Grandma's an expert, auntie's an expert, uncle, grandpa, they're the experts because they have that shared experience of, say, living through the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, changing with the times in the 60s and 70s, all the way up to now, and those traditions are real. Every single one of those important times in our Navajo and Apache history have a food connection to it. And it's political, it's legal. Sometimes it's very unfortunate. Sometimes it's very powerful. So that's what I mean by a lot of times food is on the back burner. You know what I mean? So I would say take it upon yourself and start looking into native foods more and cooking at home. It doesn't have to be all perfect all the time. Make it fun, Season your cooking with some laughter. You know what I mean? You don't have to be all serious thinking you're being a badass chef and all that stuff. And you can just have fun, tell stories. I'll maybe one of the final things I'll share is that my dad, my late father, Vincent Craig, he used to he was a Marine Corps guy, police officer, probation officer, just kind of all around good guy. You know him as the singer and songwriter. And he was also kind of a utility cook. You know what I mean? He occasionally called it chow. You know what I mean? Like a Marine Corps dude. But there was one dish that he used to make. He would take those green spinach noodles. He'd brown some ground beef in a pan. He'd go open up a can of mushroom soup, plop it in the ground beef. He'd cook the noodles, and he'd pour those green spinach noodles in that. And because you got the green noodles, the brown soupy stuff, the black mushrooms, and the brown meat, he would tell us boys to come and eat. Say, come and eat. We made camouflage goulash. You know what I mean? and I think we all have a food story like that about someone in our lives. And this is how it can be a way to keep traditions alive. You can do storytelling through food while you're cooking. You could say, I learned this from my grandma. I learned this from my dad. You can even make jokes about how they were as you're cooking and sharing. And I guarantee those food memories are very, very, very powerful. And it's a good way to just pass on tradition. You don't have to take it too serious. You know what I mean? It's really cool.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad we appreciate you talking with me and sharing your story, your experiences. And I think that's one thing that's pretty cool about the podcast is that, before starting this, there weren't a lot of podcasts emphasizing and highlighting Native stories like yours. And I'm glad I got to interview you. But we're all set. If you can send me a couple of pictures so I can put it on the back of the podcast, or if I can pull from your social media pages.
Yeah, just if you pull from the social media, just run them by me first, and I'll send a couple recent cool pictures.
Okay, then I'll just wait. You can just send me a couple that you might want. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, brother, good. Man. Hey, good talking with you, and I'm glad we got to connect.
Yeah. Well, let's do it again sometime. You know what I mean? Let's do a follow-up.
Yeah, we can do another one. Maybe when once we're past this pandemic, and talk a little bit more about Cafe Gaujon.
Yeah, and just kind of to plant the seed now, there's kind of working on some concepts for as moving into springtime when wild foods start to come up, kind of techniques and approaches to do that safely. You know what I mean? If the pandemic is kind of going down a little bit, or if we're still in the middle of it, just some recommendations and tools and stuff like that. Again, as a kind of a healing aspect. For dads and sons or families to go together. You know what I mean? So that'd be cool to talk about.
Yeah, let's do that. I like that idea. And I think that's one thing that I really like to talk about too on this podcast is wellness and improving our health. And I mean, I've interviewed a lot of runners and people in mental health field, just because there's a huge need for mental health in Native communities, and there's lacking resources in there. So absolutely, let's do it.
Yeah,
let's plan on it, man.
All right, cool.
All right, man. Hey, have a good night, bud.
You too. Take care.
All right, man. Yeah, talk to you later. Bye-bye.